So my story of sin begins, as so many of them do, in the field of college textbook publishing. I worked in the editorial department, and I loved my job. And I had just been moved from editorial into marketing because my company had been bought by another company, and that's the job that I was offered, and so I accepted it, and I was grateful for what I was given. But I really wanted my old job back. And both of those jobs were high travel positions. You'd go all over the country, 2-year colleges, 4-year universities, conferences, whatever. And one day I found myself in Boise, meeting someone that I had only experienced through her reputation. Her name was Michelle. And everyone said she was ruthless. She was very high up in the editorial department of this new company. And so when I met her, I was really surprised that the first thing she did to me was flatter me. She said, "Gosh, we've heard a lot about you in editorial, and we understand that we might want you back on our team." And so then she proceeded to tell me that they didn't have an opening on their team right now. But there was someone she was willing to fire. So if I would commit to this job, she would go ahead and clear the way for me. So like I said, I really wanted to work in editorial again. But while it's very hard to stick up for yourself, it is actually extraordinarily easy to stick up for someone else. So my answer was pretty instantaneous. I was like, no fucking way. First of all, do your homework. The woman you're talking about is a friend of mine. Secondly, she's a damn good editor. There is absolutely no reason on earth that you could think of to fire her. And thirdly, that is no way to get somebody on your team. And Michelle flipped on me instantly. And she started to threaten me instead of flatter me. And she said, "If you ever tell anyone about this conversation, I will know about it, because we're the only two people here, and I will make your life a living hell." I wasn't gonna mess with her. She was really senior. And like I said, she was known for being ruthless. So I just, okay, threw up my hands, did my marketing job, didn't put up any sort of a fuss, never hoped for editorial again. But she, I guess, decided to cut out the middleman and just go straight to making my life a living hell, because she was in a bunch of meetings that I was in, because we were in the same subject, the same discipline area of college textbooks, which was science and math, and she belittled me every chance she got. She made fun of me in meetings. She would make it out as if I hadn't done my homework, as if I was somehow wrong, as if I was somehow an idiot. And it was extraordinarily uncomfortable, but what could I do? And so I was so grateful when she hired David. David came with a reputation also, being a good guy. He was kind to everyone. He was just generally sweet. He had a baby face. He had a sweet smile. He had a British accent, so we all gave him points just for the way he used his voice, And it turned out he inadvertently became my champion. He would go toe-to-toe with Michelle in these meetings. He would stick up for me. And he'd say, I actually think Kelley has a really good idea. Or, Kelley actually said that the other day. Or why don't we go ahead and try what Kelley's suggesting and see what happens? And so all of a sudden, going to work was palatable again. And since David and I were slightly closer together, he was still senior to me, but he was not quite as far above me as Michelle, he and I were on a lot of work trips together. And one of those work trips took us to Houston. And we were working with the rep there for several days, going to all the schools in the area. And at the end of each day, we would take the rep out to dinner. And on Friday night, we took the rep out for drinks at the Black Lab, which is a pub in Houston that I highly recommend. And I'd been there a lot in college. I was very comfortable there. And we're drinking, we're talking. The rep's responsibility in this sort of an environment is to take the editor and the marketing person around with them to be their chauffeur. So he'd driven us there. And he finally said, I've got to go back home to my family. And David and I were like, we're here. What are we going to do, right? So we'll just stay out. We'll take a cab. No big deal. So the rep leaves. And David and I decided to go out drinking and dancing, because dancing was a thing that publishing people did. Like, if you get more than enough publishing people in a room, like, there's just going to be, we're going to find a place and we're going to go dancing. So we went to a country western bar. And it turned out country western was not David's jam. So instead of dancing, we drank and we talked. And we talked about the sorts of things that you talk about when you are building a friendship, opening yourself up to somebody, all those vulnerabilities. We talked about life and our expectations for life and what we thought about what had happened to our lives so far. We talked about our fear of death. We talked about our fear of our parents dying, because what happens when your parents die and all of a sudden the people who have loved you the most and the first, and they're gone, what do you do? And eventually I stopped drinking because, I don't like to feel sick in the morning. But David kept going. And as he's going, he's just getting closer and closer to me, emotionally and physically. And sort of just a little bit at a time. He didn't touch me, he just got really close. And I think all of us, at least all of us who have been young women, are aware of that situation where it flips a little bit. And now all of a sudden you realize he's thinking something that you weren't thinking. And so you have to go ahead and send all your no thank you signals as effectively as you can without hurting anyone's feelings. So you make space, you step back, you lean back instead of forward. You stop smiling as much. You don't laugh at this person's jokes. You titter, but you don't really laugh. You don't give much information when they ask you a question. You just try to put up as many blocks in this invisible wall in between the two of you as you feel like you can get away with without hurting his feelings. David was picking up on none of these signals. So by the time we decided to take a cab back to the hotel, I was uncomfortable enough that I pretended to fall asleep in the cab. Houston's a big city, so I had a nice long pseudo nap. And I was leaning as far away from him as I could get because I was, asleep on the window. And then when we got to the hotel, I let myself fake startle awake and, oh my, are we here already? And we pay the cab driver and we go inside to the hotel lobby. And he says, I had some work questions. And I said, okay. So we each grabbed our styrofoam cup of coffee that had clearly been out since that morning and sat down in the lobby together to talk about work in the middle of the night. And we were discussing a PowerPoint presentation that I was going to give on Monday. And he and I had already been over all the detail. You sort of make sure that you've got everybody on board before you go into the meeting. But we were running through it again. And he said, I'd really like to see it. Why don't we go back and we'll take a look at it in your room? And I said, yeah, no, I'll go get my laptop and I'll just bring it right out here, so hang on just a second. And he said, no, I'll come back with you. And I said, no, that's okay. I don't mind. I'll go get my laptop and I'll just bring it right out here. And we went back and forth a couple times on that. He kept pushing about coming back to my room, and I kept saying, no, thank you. And eventually, I ended up in my room by myself with the door locked, calling my husband. Not my current husband, my ex-husband. He was not my ex-husband at the time, you understand. And I said to him, I think I've been propositioned. What do I do? And he said, you don't do a damn thing. And I am sure that he was trying to do right by me by giving me an honest answer about what sort of recourse I would have, which was none. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like he'd chosen not to stand up for me, He said, you were out drinking, you went dancing. What did you think was gonna happen, So I thought, okay, well, it is what it is. I'll go in on Monday. I'll pretend like nothing happened. I can do that. So I get on the plane in the morning. Luckily, we had separate flights back. And I'm preparing myself. I'm finishing my presentation. On Monday, I show up, and I am ready to go. It is business as usual. Kelley and David, friends just like we've always been. And it turned out David had flipped on me over the weekend. And he had decided to spend all of his free time belittling me and making fun of me and saying, in response to PowerPoint presentations that we had previously discussed, what the hell were you thinking? You know, I've never seen that. That's not the sort of thing we agreed to. Just threw me under the bus every chance he got. It was like he was in league with Michelle. And all of a sudden, going to work was hell because every single day, one or the other of them was there to undermine me and make me feel uncomfortable and very, very bad about my work and what I was doing. And so I realized this is what we read about in the handbooks, you know? It wasn't before we got back to work on Monday, because he was completely within his rights to be attracted to me. Who wouldn't be, right? Am I right? Where's my husband? Winking at the audience just at random. And he was completely within his rights to flirt with me. He was completely within his rights to proposition me. I mean, he was married, I was married, we both knew that. It didn't make him a good guy, but it wasn't like a thing he wasn't allowed to do, and it was completely within my rights to say no. So nobody had done anything wrong until Monday morning when he decided to retaliate because of my rejection. So you'd think the answer would be go to HR. But I knew better than that. Because a few months ago, a different woman had brought a sexual harassment suit about a different man at the same company. And oddly enough, her position was eliminated. And I mean, she doesn't work here anymore. We wish her all the best. So I knew how that was going to play out. I couldn't do that. So where do I go? Who's going to stand up for me? So I reach out to my manager. She's a young woman. She's a little bit older than I am, but she's a young woman. She'll understand. Her name was Julie. She also had a reputation for a lot of things, one of which was the amount of jewelry that she wore. She would wear these bangle bracelets, just one on top of the other, on top of the other, and I'm not exaggerating, like straight from, here to here at both arms. She'd jingle when she walked. You always knew when she was coming. And it wasn't just the jewelry. She always dressed to the nines. She was very proud of her appearance. And I went to her, and it was embarrassing. It was really awful to have to admit that this had happened. It was uncomfortable. And I asked her what I should do. She waited until I was done. And then she laughed at me. She said, "Kelley, honey, you're mistaken." She said, "I've been around David a lot." She said, "Let's face it, if he was gonna come on to somebody, he'd be coming on to me, not you. So you're just gonna have to get over this." So now we know that there's nowhere that I can go. In retrospect, I could have gone to Julie's manager. He was a good man, and I think he actually would have done right by me. But at the time, I was too demoralized. What else was I gonna do? Go to somebody else and have them tell me that I had asked for it or done the wrong thing or misunderstood or wasn't pretty enough to be sexually harassed or what have you? So I started looking for another job, because that's what you do at this point. And every day at work, I was miserable. I would get miserable on Friday night because the next day is Saturday, which is the day that comes before Sunday, which is the day that comes before you have to go back into work and see these people again. And before I found something outside, within a couple of weeks, maybe a month, a man that I knew from a different area of the company, a very good man, came to me with his female manager. And they said, "We don't know what the hell is going on, but this cannot continue." They didn't know, I never told them. if they're listening to this video, it's the first time they've heard of it. And but they saw what was happening, and they said, we would be honored if you would come and work in our group, and we will protect you, and we will move you to a different subset of the organization, and you will never have to see these people again. And this other job was communications. And my switch from editorial to marketing had been a perceived demotion, because that's not the direction that you went if you were really wanting to move up in the organization. You went from marketing to editorial, not the other way around. And communications was perceived as a demotion from marketing, okay, because it was the back office job. It was not the front spotlight position. So it was yet another demotion. But it was what I was offered, and I was very grateful for it, and I took it. And that was 15 years ago, and my field is still communications. It turned out I loved the work, I loved my colleagues, I loved my managers, I was so happy, and I was safe. I didn't have to see those people ever again. And communications became my thing. So, since it all worked out so well, when I saw the #MeToo going around, it felt kind of wrong to Me Too, because that was like saying I'd been sexually harassed and something really awful had happened. And, it wasn't that bad in the scheme of things. Like, I didn't get raped. Like, he didn't even touch me, So that didn't feel right. But to not Me Too was like a lie of omission, which didn't feel right either. It didn't feel fair to the other people something had happened to. And then when I thought about sharing my story, I decided that it was really maybe a bad idea to share my story in an environment about lust. Because David may have felt lust for me, but that's not usually what sexual harassment is all about. There might be some sex, but it's mostly about power. And then I was reluctant to do something that would be videotaped, because God forbid it get back to the wrong people, right? What if they see me? Well, can they somehow get me again? Can they do something else to me from where they are right now in a different industry? Like, can they hurt me in some way? Or what if I hurt their feelings? That would be too bad, And as I was pondering all of those questions, I remembered a quote by Anne Lamott that I really like, that I've used as a touchstone before. And it goes something like, you own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. Because if they wanted you to speak more kindly of them, then they should have behaved better. So, Me Too.